Number 10. Richard Taylor. In late July of 2022, after crashing his pickup truck in the driveway of a Pickaway County, Ohio home, 26-year-old Richard Taylor entered the house. The noise woke up the homeowner's adult son, who looked outside and saw that the truck had hit his work vehicle. He heard Taylor coming inside, so he grabbed his gun and quickly warned his parents about what was going on before going to confront the intruder. The man's mother later told police that her son encountered Taylor on the stairs leading up to the second floor. He repeatedly told the trespasser to stop, but Taylor kept climbing up the steps and growling at the homeowner's son, who opened fire and shot the suspect. Taylor continued climbing the steps, so the man shot him several more times, at which point he fell down the stairs. He tried to run, but collapsed and died in the home. Inside Taylor's truck, deputies found a handgun and a bag of psychedelic mushrooms. Shortly after the fatal encounter, the Pickaway County Sheriff's Office released a statement clarifying that an investigation is ongoing. The man who shot Taylor has not been charged with any crimes. Number 9. Steve Shepard Jr. In November 2014, an intruder kicked in the door of Howard Murphy's Indianapolis home, thinking that the owner wouldn't be there. Unfortunately for him, he was, and when Murphy saw the suspect reaching for what he assumed was a weapon, he shot him in the leg. The crook fled the scene, but was soon apprehended and charged in connection with the break-in. Authorities cleared Murphy of any wrongdoing later that year. But history recently repeated itself when he came face to face with yet another burglar. The intruder entered his home armed with a knife just days after thousands of dollars worth of electronics were stolen from the residence. Murphy told local station Fox 59 that he heard the intruder breaking in through a window a little after 4 o'clock in the morning. When he went downstairs to confront the trespasser, the crook, later identified as 64-year-old Steve Shepard Jr., threw a video game console at him. Murphy responded with gunfire, and Shepard ran to an upstairs bedroom where he died from his injuries. The homeowner said that he didn't even realize at first that he had shot Shepard because he was still moving around. He cooperated with police and was released from custody later that day. Murphy told Fox 59 that he hated that the deadly shooting happened, but that he hoped it would serve as a cautionary tale to others who are thinking of committing a home invasion. He added that while he feels bad, he works hard for what he's got, and that if someone tries to take it, there will be consequences. Number 8. Ammon Jacob Woodhead. A Centerville, Utah family was left devastated earlier this year after someone broke into their house and set it on fire, sparking a blaze that could be seen for miles and causing $1.2 million worth in damages. Clarence Newman was at the home that he built 35 years ago with his wife and father-in-law when 37-year-old Ammon Jacob Woodhead broke in and told him he was going to burn the house down with the family still inside if they didn't give him all their money. None of the victims claimed to know the suspect. Newman told Woodhead that there was no money at the house. The suspect dumped gasoline around the house and punched 2 of the victims before sparking the blaze and attempting to steal one of the family's vehicles. When he was unsuccessful, he ran back into the home and tried barricading himself in it. Police found him inside the burning house, and he claimed he was armed with a knife, so they tased him and took him into custody. Luckily, all 3 victims survived, but the family is now required to start over from scratch after losing their beloved home. Woodhead faces multiple felony charges, including attempted murder, arson, burglary, and possession of a controlled substance. It was later discovered that he had committed 2 vehicle burglaries and 1 home burglary before going to the Newmans. Nobody knows exactly why he targeted the family. Number 7. Angela Chalmers. In 2010, 2 men stormed into the Vancouver home of Angela Chalmers in a case of mistaken identity. They were targeting the previous homeowner, who they thought still lived there when they committed the violent intrusion. When they realized they had the wrong person, they discussed what to do with Chalmers. Worried that she would identify them to the police after having seen their faces, they decided to kill her. The suspects brutally beat Chalmers and left her for dead. Luckily, a neighbor had heard the violent altercation and dialed 911, and emergency responders arrived in time to revive her. Chalmers, who is now 44 years old and lives in Winnipeg, told CBC News that she still struggles with lasting physical pain as well as post-traumatic stress disorder. She was recently forced to revisit her trauma when she woke up to her dog barking and found a stranger sleeping on her living room sofa. She quietly went upstairs and alerted her roommate, and the women barricaded themselves in a bedroom closet and dialed 911. They were shocked when the dispatcher told them that officers couldn't respond right away because they were really busy at the moment, and asked the women to wake up the intruder, which they wisely refused to do. Police finally arrived 20 minutes later, at which point Chalmers and her roommate rushed downstairs and out of the home. When they woke the man up, he became aggressive, and it took 4 officers to take him into custody. Winnipeg police spokesperson Kelly Den told CBC that some of the 911 dispatchers' conduct deviated from standard practice. She said that it's not customary to advise a 911 caller to interact with a home intruder, and that people are usually told to exit the building if they can until police arrive. Chalmers is thankful that nothing was stolen and that she and her roommate are okay, but she says that she's left wondering what might have happened if she had obeyed the dispatcher's request for her to wake up the stranger on her sofa. Number 6. David Young. In July of this year, Vermont Labor Commissioner Michael Harrington and his family endured a terrifying home invasion when a man who was staying in a duplex next door to their house forced his way inside in the late evening hours. 32-year-old David Young proceeded to grab a steak knife and threaten a teenager with it before Harrington knocked the blade out of his hand and subdued him. Police charged Young with burglary and aggravated assault and took him to a local hospital. He was released later that night and was due to appear in court the next day, but never showed up. Young was soon found dead in his home after taking his own life. The troubled man had no criminal or police history whatsoever in Vermont. In a statement, Harrington said that he and his family knew Young as a kind and gentle soul. He further explained that after the incident, he learned that Young was a combat veteran who was experiencing a mental health crisis. Both Harrington and his brother emphasized the importance of making mental health services available to those in need. Number 5. Henry Vincent. British burglar Henry Vincent got more than he bargained for when he and an accomplice entered a retiree's home in southeast London in 2018. The pair knocked on the door and then pushed their way inside when the homeowner answered. Armed with only a screwdriver, 37-year-old Vincent found himself face-to-face with 78-year-old Richard Osborne Brooks, who grabbed a 12-inch, 305mm kitchen knife and was prepared to defend his wife at all costs. The accomplice fled the scene, and Osborne Brooks warned Vincent that his weapon was bigger and advised him to leave the house or he'd be sorry. With cocaine and heroin coursing through his system, he ran toward Osborne Brooks and straight into the knife. After he was stabbed, Vincent ran from the home and collapsed outside. He died from his injuries, and authorities charged Osborne Brooks with murder. But he insisted he was innocent, and an investigation was launched to determine whether he was criminally responsible for killing Vincent. The senior citizen testified that he expected the robber to leave when he showed him the knife, while Vincent's family members insisted that he was a non-violent person. They accused Osborne Brooks of murdering the career criminal in a more deliberate fashion than he claimed. A coroner's findings supported the elderly homeowner's version of events and ruled Vincent's death a lawful killing. Number 4. Joseph Mahl. Megan and Philippe Coulier and their 5-year-old daughter live in a historic home in Newton, Iowa, that has been mistaken as a homeless shelter several times since they bought it in 2019. But these encounters never got violent until recently, when Megan received notifications on her phone about an intruder at around 2 o'clock in the morning. She wasn't home at the time, but her husband and daughter were fast asleep in their beds. Philippe and the child were soon woken up by the sound of someone talking downstairs. He told local station KCCI that by the time he got out of bed and turned the light on, a man who was later identified as Joseph Marl was nearing the top of the stairs. The drunk trespasser began yelling at Philippe, asking him what he was doing in his house. A brief struggle ensued between the two men and came to a brief pause when Philippe shoved Marl down the stairs and dialed 911. Marl ran back up the stairs, unaware that Philippe had spent years in the French army and was an Aikido master. The homeowner fought Marl while protecting his daughter and remained on the phone with the 911 dispatcher. The fight finally ended when he threw Marl down the stairs a second time. Police arrived minutes later and charged the suspect with first-degree burglary and public intoxication. Number 3. Louise Sacco. In 2020, 23-year-old Celeste Mano was sleeping in her bedroom at her home in Melbourne, Australia, when an intruder smashed through her window and stabbed her to death during the early morning hours. Shortly thereafter, the young woman's former co-worker, 35-year-old Louise Sacco, drove to the police station and turned herself in. He was charged with murder. Mano was Sacco's team leader at a call center until he left the job about a year earlier. When he quit, Mano offered her emotional support. But Sacco overstepped, and by the time he killed Celeste, she had reported him to law enforcement at least twice for stalking. Sacco pleaded not guilty to Mano's murder, claiming that his poor mental health absolved him of culpability for the crime. Earlier this year, a forensic psychiatrist deemed him unfit to stand trial and predicted that he'll remain incapable for at least the next year. At the last update, it was unclear whether the court plans to challenge the findings, which would put a jury in charge of deciding whether Sacco is culpable for his actions. If the court agrees with the assessment, he'll be sent to an institution until his mental health is restored and then released back into society. In the meantime, Mano's mother, Aggie De Moro, is campaigning for improved legal protection for stalking victims. So far, her efforts have led to the Victorian government's first ever review of Australia's stalking laws. Number 2. William Jones. A family's lives were forever changed one day in late 2019 when 35-year-old William Jones entered their Kalamazoo, Michigan home, armed with 2 pistols, and held them hostage. He ordered Haley Coe and her 2-year-old daughter to go upstairs, while he held her husband, 22-year-old Christopher Neal, at gunpoint on the first floor. Coe dialed 911 from upstairs, and police formed a perimeter around the home. They tried communicating with Jones, who claimed that Neal was dead. When the police heard a gunshot, they rushed inside, where Jones had barricaded himself inside a bedroom. The intruder began shooting through the door and struck 3 officers. Other members of law enforcement stormed the bedroom and found Neal dead with a bullet wound to the head. Jones jumped through a glass window in an attempt to flee, but was soon found with his injuries and taken to the hospital. He was convicted of Neal's murder and received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Jones had remained emotionless throughout the trial, but appeared remorseful at the end of Coe's victim impact statement and mouthed an apology at Neal's family before being led out of the courtroom. In her impact statement, Coe told Jones that his actions had ruined her life and left her and her daughter with post-traumatic stress disorder as they try to move on from the suffering that the senseless murder caused. Number 1. Joseph Ortega. In June of this year, 93-year-old Joe Teague became increasingly frustrated recently after suffering a string of break-ins at his suburban Los Angeles home. Agitated by the slow police response to his 911 calls, the retired plumber made sure he was prepared to defend himself in case it happened again. Just days after having his house burglarized in broad daylight, he found himself being targeted yet again by a group of thieves, this time in the middle of the night. Teague later told reporters that he grabbed his gun and tried putting them under citizen's arrest, but they refused to cooperate, and one of the intruders came at him with a fishing pole. They began throwing things at the senior citizen, at which point he fired his gun and shot 33-year-old Joseph Ortega. Teague dialed 911 and told the dispatcher that he was holding several thieves. By the time the police arrived, several of the burglars had fled the scene on foot, according to witness accounts. The elderly homeowner was questioned and released. Ortega died a week later from his injuries. A Riverside County Sheriff's Department spokesperson said that the shooting appeared to be justified, but that an investigation is ongoing. Detectives are working to identify the other suspects and have yet to announce any arrests. Thanks for watching. Would you rather get into a physical fight with an aggressive armed intruder who refuses to leave, or have $1,000 worth of valuables stolen when you're out of the house? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe.